If you're in a marriage where your wife is always angry at you, you need to watch this video because I'm going to give you the four main reasons. I mean, really, all reasons why that happens in your relationship. Once you understand the core issue of why this is happening, you're going to be able to approach it and actually solve it. But until you can figure out why things are happening, you are going to be lost in the sauce, my friend. This will not get any better. This will not suddenly magically go away. You need to spend time in the diagnostics. Think about it as if you were going to an eye exam, if you're going to see an optometrist. If they have a half-hour appointment, 20 to 25 minutes is figuring out what's wrong with your eye before they actually prescribe what kind of glasses or eye drops you need. Figuring out the root of the problem is 90% of the work, and I'm going to dive into that in detail. If you're new here, my name is Dr. John DeBach. I'm a couples counselor and relationship coach. Been doing that for about a decade and a half. I have 1 million followers across my social media platform. Grew that without spending a buck on ads over the last year. I've been on national TV, published books, and I'm married to the woman of my dreams. She's a psychologist herself. We have 4 kids. We've been together 15 years. So I walk the walk, talk the talk. Follow everything I teach. I wouldn't give you advice I wouldn't use in my own marriage. I think that's actually more significantly important than any of the other qualifications. There are a lot of marriage therapists, relationship coaches out there, online and offline, that aren't married, haven't been in the thick of it. And until you've lived it, it's really hard to kind of understand and empathize what you might be going through. Okay, so let's talk for a second about the 4 different reasons that a woman stays angry and your wife might be continuously angry with you in the relationship. The first one I'm going to start with is the one that you actually have the least control over, but I think it's important to get it out of the way just in case that's really what's going on, because you need to know if you are dealing with something that you don't have much power over, when to say, hey, this is something you have to deal with, right? And what I'm going to lump a few things into here, but I'm going to call this personal or identity issues. So if your wife has suffered from a lot of abuse in her past, and believe it or not, it's not uncommon to be in a relationship with somebody for 30 years or more and still not know the details of her childhood or past relationships. There might be some abuse there. Physical, psychological, sexual, emotional, there's different abuse. And so some of those patterns were like she's stuck in essentially protector survivor mode. And so there's some psychological wounds there. She might have an identity crisis. So a lot of times women, especially in their late 40s to 60s, empty nesting kind of era, or a career shift, they have a change in identity and she's just irritable, right? Personal things that have nothing to do with you and the relationship. There's also psychological factors. So if your wife has borderline personality disorder or she's struggling with other things, I mean, menopause can make women quite irritable. And obviously anything else that's personal, we're going to lump it in this category. So if she's suffering from chronic pain, right? So she has a fibromyalgia or she has back issues. It really has nothing to do with you and the relationship. And so I'm going to put those over to the side, okay? The first one that you actually have control over, and the more interesting ones to talk about, are the other 3. So the first one is rejection, okay? Now, this happens more than you would imagine, that a wife feels rejected by her husband. I know we talk in society and in the movies and stuff about men being the high sex drive partner. It's not every relationship. I mean, even if it is 80% of relationships, that means 2 out of every 10 couples. So you're talking about tens of millions of couples in the United States alone where the female is actually the high drive partner, or the one that is initiating more often than the man. And so if that's happening, if there's a sense of rejection, it's a special kind of pain for a woman on an emotional level to feel rejection, because she can't talk to her friends about it as easily, because her friends are saying, oh God, I can't keep my husband's hands off of me. Meanwhile, she's saying he never touches me, right? So rejection. Now, rejection comes in different forms. There's both emotional rejection and physical rejection. The physical rejection for women, if you are not giving your wife the physical side of your relationship, that's incredibly painful. What does emotional rejection look like? Emotional rejection is if she's trying to share with you and you ignore her, you're on your phone, you say, I can't deal with that right now. Essentially saying, I don't care about what's going on in your life. If that happens, that's a real kind of rejection and can often hurt just as bad, if not worse, than physical rejection, mainly because people want to connect on an emotional level more often than the physical level. Really doesn't matter. I mean, even if you're having sex 3, 4, 5 times a week, people tend to try to connect emotionally with their partner, assuming they're in the same space multiple times a day. I can't tell you how many times my wife texts me, ugh, there's this problem I have in my office, there's a bug. That's an emotional attempt at a connection. If I ignore those text messages constantly, and assuming I don't have to ignore them, I mean, I understand if you're at work and you really genuinely can't, let's say you're doing, construction and you're hammering in a nail, you don't have time to answer your wife's text. I get it, right? But if you have the ability and you just don't answer it, that is a form of emotional rejection. And so rejection really builds a callus around a wife's heart. And so you have to kind of ask yourself, am I emotionally or physically rejecting my wife? If that's happening, there's no wonder she's angry at you. The way that we respond to rejection is a feeling of sadness or anxiety. And those depression and anxiety are the two things that anger covers up, right? You have to think of anger as a secondary emotion. It's not a real emotion. People don't just get angry, right? They either get anxious that things won't change, that their safety's, compromised, or they are depressed and they're covering it up with anger. So you have to ask yourself, what's the feeling underneath the anger? If she's feeling rejected, it's depression, right? It might be anxious that she'll never be wanted, but mostly it's depression. And that anger and that irritability that's being thrusted on you is a mask to that depression. By the way, if you're liking this content, if you find this useful, do me a big favor. It's totally free for you. It only takes a second. I know most of you are on your phone. Just hit the like button and maybe the subscribe so you don't miss any more videos. It helps the algorithm really find this and show it to the right type of audience and lets me know that I should be making more just like this. Okay, on to number 2. So number 2 is similar to rejection. It's kind of its cousin, and that's neglect. Okay, so rejection is when there are advances. In the Gottman world, they call them emotional bids. And in every modality of therapy, whether it's attachment theory, emotionally focused, imago, they all have their own words. The one that's most known for this is the Gottman method. So it's an emotional bid, right? I'm making a bid for your attention. Is it returned or is it ignored, right? If it's ignored, that is rejection. If it's returned, that's a connection. Neglect is different. Neglect is when they don't feel that you are making anything proactively, right? When you're not making any emotional bets. If you're not being proactive in trying to connect with your wife on an emotional, psychological, spiritual, and yes, physical level, if there's no attempt on your end to try to connect, that's not rejection because there's nothing you're rejecting, right? But that lack of being proactive, that is neglect. So you don't ask her out on dates. You don't ask her about her day. You don't give her flowers once in a while. You don't sit there from time to time and say, how are you feeling about your family lately or your career? Or what do you think about the next 10 years? Right? If you aren't proactively participating in your wife's life on that deeper level, or even just on that physical level, if there's that form of neglect, it is very, very likely that that is the main cause of the anger that you're seeing. Now, I have a lot of men that I work with who are in their late 40s to early 60s. And one thing I need to point out, again, this is going to be on the physical side, is that as women go into perimenopause and then menopause, postmenopause, around that age, you'll hear things in session if you do couples work like nobody's getting any cuter, when everybody gets wrinkly when they're older. Women say this as a way of coping with the idea of aging to try to like minimize it, but it's a very powerful statement. Essentially, they're saying, I feel like I'm worth less on the market. There's a high price tag for women in today's society for aging. And as they round the bend around 50 years old, a lot of women feel not as attractive as they used to be. You know, if your wife feels like she's her best self and she looks better than she ever did, oh my God, God bless you. Wonderful, amazing. You know, my wife looks amazing. She's not 25 anymore. She wasn't 25 when I met her. But you know, that's wonderful. But for a lot of women, there's this kind of feeling of like, am I going to be wanted? And so if there isn't this proactive sense of trying to seduce her, especially around that age, man, is that going to turn into a deep depression and a sense of neglect that is going to cause problems. My wife, in my opinion, looks better than she ever did. Now, if I ask her, she thinks I'm nuts. She complains about this part of her body and this part of her face and this, and I think she's gorgeous. But I've noticed I need to double down on complimenting her. I need to point it out more and more because listen, bodies do change, faces do change. And there are changes. I happen to enjoy them. But if you're getting Us Weekly in the mail, like my wife, and that's, her junk reading on the weekend, and everybody's airbrushed like beyond belief, it feels horrible to look in the mirror and not have that Photoshop treatment. One day they're going to make AI mirrors, and then everybody's just going to look great when they see themselves in a mirror. Until then, we have to deal with the reality that I have wrinkles in my forehead, and yeah, men have an easier time just not caring, right? Not that men don't care at all, but we just have an easier time with it. Like, the salt and pepper in my hair and my beard and stuff. It's not such a big deal for women. Gray hair for women, big no-no for most people, right? The cost and the price is very high. And it's not just physical, but I wanted to point that out, right? It's emotional as well. I wanted to point out the physical because a lot of people who watch this, you're in that age group where your wife is dealing with her own, she's looking in the mirror and facing her own sexuality and society's kind of expectations of her. The third one, and the last one we'll talk about today, which is really important, is overwhelm. If you're being pulled in 20 different directions, it's very hard to get a sense of calmness and peace in your life, and you will get irritable, right? If you have a lack of sleep, you will get irritable. If you're hangry, right, and you just have no time to eat or even prepare the kinds of foods you like, you'll become irritable and angry. And so if your wife is overworked, it's probably one of the reasons, if not the reason, why she's always angry at you. Now, you're probably sitting there wondering, why doesn't that go in that first category of that's her problem, she's overworked? So this is where it gets complicated. So depending on your life, you might have a lot of kids, you might have a lot of grandkids, you might have a shared business. She might have taken off more than she can chew. She might be taking on jobs that you haven't even asked her to take on, but she just views it as her responsibility. But you play a role in that usually as a husband. And this is one of the more complicated ones. Listen, if there's rejection, it's an easy fix. Start giving her flowers, start writing, well, that's neglect, right? Start giving her flowers, start asking her out on dates, write a couple love notes, right? There's very clear things you could do. If it's rejection, every time she comes to you and starts talking to you, put your phone down and listen. These are very simple things. But when it's overwhelm, sometimes you're spread thin too. And so finding ways to talk about it becomes incredibly important. You have to say, hey, are you overwhelmed? Are you spread thin? What I don't have all the time in the world, but maybe we don't have to do all the things that we're doing. Maybe the kids don't need a shower every single day if you're still in the child raising years. Or if you're in the grandparent years, maybe we don't watch the grandkids every single day. I can't tell you how many couples I've had where the grandkids literally come over to the couple's house every single day for multiple hours. And here's the husband saying, I wanted to have my wife back after the kids are out of the house, and now she's running a daycare center. And it's like I feel like I'm never going to get her. And he gets sad and a little bit irritable and withdraws. Meanwhile, the wife feels like he doesn't pay any attention to her, and she's got a million things to do because she's got to make the food for the grandkids and pick them up and all this. And what happens? She gets angry because he's not helping, because she feels like he could help and he's not. So being spread thin is a real problem in relationships. So ask yourself, right? Is it Rejection. Is it neglect? Am I really rejecting my wife's advances for emotional and physical contact? If the answer is a clear no, move on to neglect. Do I do enough proactively? Am I taking her out on dates? Am I complimenting her? Am I initiating physical touch? Right? If that's yeah, I'm doing all those. Move on to the third one. Does she feel overwhelmed? Does your wife ever sit down and read a magazine unbothered? Does she ever, watch TV and nobody kind of bugs her? If all three of those are fine, then it's probably the personal one where maybe there's some trauma, some psychological effects, and you should look into that. But go through the first three. It's a little insulting if your wife's angry to go straight to you have borderline personality disorder. It's also inappropriate, right? So you have to take the steps to go through them the right way. And also, hopefully it is one of those three because those three are easily fixed compared to she has trauma in her past because then you have to convince her to go, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully that was helpful. If you want to work with me directly to work through some of this stuff and dive deeper in your own relationship, you can work with me one-on-one, or I do men's groups from time to time that are small and exclusive and really dive deep. Information is below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.